Good evening, everybody. First, let me thank Amita Madam and the Dabar Foundation for organizing this conference. It has been really great sessions from morning till evening. And about germline and somatic mutations, till now enough interest has been created about BRCA and ovarian cancer. So I hope this session will tell us about the rates of mutations. So the first study is about germline mutation. This germline and somatic mutations, both the studies are from the same center. It is from University Hospital of Cologne, Germany. From 20 different centers, they have analyzed the germline and somatic mutations of consecutive patients with ovarian cancer. So there is no need of background. We know that why do we need BRCA testing? It's for prognostication, it's for targeted therapy, and is also for screening their relatives. And in this study, there was prospective consecutive testing of patients of invasive epithelial ovarian cancer. And the patients were tested either during their first diagnosis of ovarian cancer or when they had a platinum-sensitive relapse. So what were the genes tested? In addition to the BRCA, they tested other core genes including ATM, CDH1 check, RAD51C. They also tested Lynch-associated genes and some other high-risk genes. In total, 25 genes were tested. And for testing, they used a custom-tailored NGS SureSelect gene panel. And in addition, they screened for large genomic rearrangements. And if you had a class 4-5 mutation according to IARC, it was considered as a deleterious variant. And a patient was said to have positive family history if at least one relative had breast cancer or ovarian cancer, or if the patient had a personal history of breast cancer. And the results, here you can see that there are 522 patients were screened in total, and they had 281 patients were of primary ovarian cancer and 241 patients were of relapse. And the histological subtype was high-grade serous in most, more than 70% was high-grade serous. And in primary, the high-grade serous was 72%, and in relapse, about 83%. Stage, as more patients were at stage 3 and 4. And the mutations identified, any mutation, 28% of patients, in total, 28% of patients had identified germline mutations. And in primary, it was around 25%, and in relapse, it was about 31.5%. And in this, the core gene mutation, the core gene mutation constituted about 96%. And in the core gene mutation, BRCA constituted the bulk. As we all know, BRCA constituted the bulk of mutation. It was about 20%. As said earlier by Dr. Krishnan, yes, it's about 20% was BRCA mutations. And BRCA1 about 15%, and BRCA2 about 5%. And the other two significant mutations seen was RAD51C and PALB2. And this is the same data presented as a pie chart. And when the results were subclassified according to the age, when you look at patients who are less than 60 years, the chance of finding a mutation in a person less than 60 years was 80%. And in an older patient more than 60 years was 10%. Not 80%, sorry, 30%, and 10% for a lady who is more than 60 years. And if you have a positive family history, you tend to find more mutations. 31% of mutations for a person with a positive family history, and if you have negative family history, only 11%. Again, high-grade serous had more mutations compared to other groups. 23% of high-grade serous had mutations compared to the other group. And in primary diagnosis, any mutation you tend to find in primary diagnosis or relapse, it is same. So this study, they concluded that 28% of patients with ovarian cancer show a germline mutation, with 20% of them being BRCA mutation. And if you're testing only for BRCA mutations, you're going to miss 7% of the additional mutations. And you cannot depend on family history or age or histological subtype to test for mutations. As said earlier, every patient with ovarian cancer should undergo for mutation testing, including BRCA and other high-risk genes. A second study from the same center was in the same subset of patients. They looked into the somatic mutation. The somatic mutation, There is sparse data on the somatic mutations in ovarian cancer. So this was a cohort study. They analyzed the 25 ovarian cancer related genes. So this time the DNA from blood and also FFP tumor samples were taken. And in addition to the 25 genes, they also included PIK3CA. So some patients from that group were excluded. They've not given any reasons why those patients were excluded, but 431 patients are analyzed in this, and 245 were at first diagnosis and 186 was of platinum sensitive relapse. And variants presenting in tumor sample but not in corresponding blood sample were considered somatic, as we all know. And they found, as said earlier, the germline mutations was in BRCA1, BRCA2 20%, non-BRCA 7%, but somatic mutation is only 4%. So the percentage of somatic mutations is only 4 compared to 20% of germline BRCA mutations. You could find only 4% of somatic mutations. And non-BRCA germline mutation was 7, and at the same time you could find non-germline somatic mutations only 0.9%. But somatic TP53 mutations were seen in 77%, and PIK3C or PTEN mutations were found in 7.2. And here they did a BRCA analysis in the FFP tissue using MLP analysis, but 27% of patients failed this analysis, this technique to detect BRCA. The same data represented as a chart. These were the mutations identified. And here they concluded that the deleterious somatic mutations of BRCA1 and BRCA2 are low, only 4.4%. And germline mutations account for the bulk, 82% of the mutations identified in the tumor samples. And TP53 mutation is common, it is 77%. And using tissue samples alone to identify mutation is not suitable, as you could miss some genomic rearrangements. Next study is on genetic counseling. So I think this issue is relevant in India also, because we all know we have a dearth of genetic counselors. And when a patient is looking for genetic testing, to explain the risk and to promote informed decision making and to provide risk appropriate recommendations, at the same time attending to the psychosocial effect on the patient, we are not enough. The clinician is not enough. We need genetic counselors. So this study was done in Utah, US, where they had a difficulty. They had a geographic difficulty in reaching each lady personally. Each person they could not attend personally for the inpatient counseling because of geographic diversity. So they did the study, and the hypothesis was telephonic counseling is non-inferior to in-person counseling. And they looked into these parameters: the psychological impact, the quality of life, the mental and physical health related quality of life, the informed decision making due to the testing, and the risk management measures taken. So only about these 4 parameters they conducted this study. It was a 2-armed randomized non-inferiority trial. The intervention was inpatient versus telephonic counseling. There were 2-year enrollment period with a 1-year outcome assessment period. And the data collected included patient anxiety, the distress, the cancer-specific distress, the quality of life, what is their risk, the perceived control about the risk of hereditary cancers, did they have a decisional conflict or regret, and what did they do once they knew about the diagnosis. And the 2 arms, the telephonic arm and the in-person arm, total there were 998 patients, and there had 493 patients in telephonic arm and 495 patients in the in-person arm. They did not differ at baseline. And here you can see that there are 97% of these patients who were included in this study had a personal history of breast, ovarian, fallopian tube, or peritoneal cancer. And only the recruited relative of BRCA1-2 carriers were included, only about 2.5%. So majority of the patients had a personal history of cancer. The psychosocial outcomes, they looked into the anxiety, the cancer-specific distress, and the quality of life. They looked at baseline, they looked at 1 year, and they looked into the difference. And they also looked into the decisional conflict, regret, and the perceived personal control. And they found that the difference in both the groups after 1 year was within the non-inferiority range. all the parameters assessed were comparable in both groups. So they came within the non-inferiority range. But the main crux is, I feel, after a counseling, the patient should undergo genetic testing. Whatever, you have the same anxiety level, you have the same quality of life, but the counseling that we are giving should enable the patient maybe to take genetic testing. In that, there is a difference. Only about 27.9% of the patients who underwent telephonic counseling adopted genetic testing, whereas 37.3% of patients who underwent in-person counseling went for genetic testing. So there is a difference, and although this difference did not reach statistical significance, and the result is similar to the other telephonic counseling studies, shows that there is a decrease in uptake of tests in patients who are not having in-person counseling. But the uptake of testing of patients in rural areas are much more than the patients in urban areas. Maybe because in urban areas already those people are having access to inpatient counseling. And what did they do? Once they knew about the diagnosis, what did they do? You can see that 3 people underwent prophylactic mastectomy. Out of 20 people who were detected BRCA positive, 3 underwent prophylactic mastectomy. That is 1 in telephonic group and 2 in the in-person group. Again, more in the in-person counseling group. And 6 people underwent prophylactic oophorectomy. Again, more in the inpatient counseling group. But because of small sample size, we could not do a significance test. So this study shows that telephonic counseling is non-inferior as considered to the anxiety and the quality of life parameters. It can be delivered safely, but it resulted in lower genetic testing rates. But rural women had more uptake of these tests. And this is a single US state study, and this included more patients with personal history of cancer, and include only a small number of mutation carriers. But this telephonic counseling can expand the access to genetic counseling, can ease the travel burden on patients and address the limited workforce available. And we should consider alternative care delivery approaches to make genetic services more accessible without sacrificing the safety. Thank you.